Here's a riddle for today. A seller raises their price for whatever reason, and you are the buyer. Are you harmed in any way when they raise their price, assuming there are other sellers that you can buy from? That's the question we'll ask as we look at some of the ramifications of the proposed new trade tariffs. Welcome, it's Friday, March 23rd, and this is Value Side. I'm your host, David Ravel. Figuring out trade tariffs can be an incredibly complex undertaking. First of all, there are many different parties who will all be affected by any decision. In the case of the proposed tariffs between the U.S. and China, those primarily affected include those companies who use the steel and other products produced by China. No doubt these buyers of Chinese goods will pay higher prices, either from China or from some other supplier. But there are other parties in these negotiations also. There are the American companies who produce these goods but are unable to compete with the Chinese on price, as well as those workers who work for the American companies. Now, currently China enjoys a significant price advantage over U.S. producers, and there are several reasons for this. Among them are the Chinese do not have comparable regulation on their production, such as OSHA, environmental requirements, and workmen's insurances. All these American regulations are expensive. The lack of environmental controls alone has saved Chinese producers millions of dollars, but has produced one of the dirtiest countries in the industrialized world. Now, the capital structure for most of the Chinese enterprises are vastly different than the U.S. In the Chinese demand economy, the prospect of direct aid from the government is perfectly acceptable. It is not in the U.S. For these and other structural reasons, combined with some geopolitical considerations, China is more than willing to sell their goods substantially cheaper than the U.S. Then along comes President Trump, proposing to give a level playing field, if you will. That is, he will impose tariffs, thereby raising the price for Chinese goods so that the Americans can compete. Buyers will have to pay a higher price. But are the buyers harmed? Now, at the micro level, economists would say that the buyer will simply adjust to the new price. And if the buyer is an intermediary, will simply pass that higher price on to their customers. Price adjustment in the marketplace is happening constantly. The price of oil goes up, gas stations immediately adjust their price at the pump. Cotton growers raise their price, apparel stores raise theirs in unison. So why all the hoopla today over the thought of tariffs? The reason, I think, is because we were all taught that it was tariffs, and particularly the Smoot-Hawley bill, that started the Great Depression of the 1930s. But this debate we're having over tariff leaves out one important difference between Smoot-Hawley and today. Back in the 1930s, we were the seller. We exported far more than we imported. Tariffs would and did hurt us because they increased the price of our products sold to the rest of the world. But today is entirely different. We are no longer the sellers, we are now the buyers. And so I ask again, in a world marketplace with multiple different suppliers, is the buyer hurt if one of the sellers raise their price? Now, we did have a couple of corporate results yesterday to note. First, ConAgra reported their earnings yesterday. ConAgra reported earnings per share of 61 cents, substantially beating Wall Street's estimate of 55 cents. And just like General Mills the day before, much of this gain was due to the Tax Act signed last year. In ConAgra's case, this amounted to a $91 million tax break. And just like General Mills the day before, they also noted inflationary pressures primarily in the transportation area. Like General Mills, the logistics of this large food-producing company are one of their primary expenses. In other corporate news, AbbVie Incorporated, the innovative pharmaceutical company, announced that they would not ask for fast-track approval for their cancer treatment drug Rova-T. Wall Street showed their disappointment by immediately dropping the share price over 10%. Now, there are very little in the way of corporate earnings announcements today. Bloomberg reports that Destination XL, an extra-large men's clothing store chain, and Enbridge Energy both are scheduled to report their earnings. Additionally, Odyssey Marine Exploration, now they're the guys who hunt for underwater treasure, they're scheduled to report their earnings this weekend. On the economic calendar, the durable goods orders will report at 8:30 this morning, followed by new home sales at 10 a.m. And that brings you up to date on the investment markets for today. We'll be back on Monday to see how we did. This has been a copyrighted edition of Value Side, published before the opening of the New York Stock Exchange for Friday, November 23rd. Don't forget, you can hear Value Side on Google Music, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, iTunes, and now on YouTube. For all of us at Value Side, I'm David Ravel, hoping you have a great day.